An update on the world of supply chain risk management with my guest today, Heather Wheatley. She is VP Analyst with Gartner. Hi, Heather.
Hi.
Thank you very much for being with me today. Supply chain risk management, of course, is maybe topic A in supply chain today because it incorporates so much to consider. How have you seen the supply chain risk management evolve over recent years?
So it's been a really interesting evolution for the process of supply chain risk management. It's fair to say pre-COVID, there was risk management in silos within supply chain. We've always done risk management. Then we had COVID and we managed risk as they came in day out and day in. Then there was a big push for resilience, and this push for resilience was coming from boards of directors, CEOs, through to chief supply chain officers. Now, what we've realized though is that resilience is very expensive and we can't necessarily get it everywhere that we want it. So what we are now seeing within supply chain is a measured approach to risk and resilience, whereby we think about what is important, what do we want to protect, what are the risks, and how much do we want to invest in mitigation.
You say it's been a consideration since day one, probably in supply chains, but it feels like the whole concept called that supply chain risk management has been formalized more just in the last few years. People more with COVID, I guess, is the culprit there, or at least one of them, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And what we're seeing actually is more supply chain centers of excellence being set up for risk and resilience to pull together that whole risk process across the supply chain.
Yeah, we even hear of like so-called chief risk officers sometimes. Not every company obviously does that, but it certainly shows an awareness of the problem.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what are the key elements, Heather, to an overarching risk management strategy?
Yeah, so actually, interestingly enough, many organizations start with what are the risks? And it's not really the right place to start. Where they should be starting is what do we want to achieve? What are our goals and our objectives of our organization? What products and services are most important to us? And what do we want to protect? Then thinking through a repeatable risk process where we identify, we analyze, we review those risks, and we put in place mitigations. Then looking at the risks themselves to think about, can we reduce both the likelihood and the impact of risk? And then in today's world where we've got so many disruptions, that capability to also deal with disruption as part of that risk management process.
Okay, you say don't start with asking what is the risk, but I'm going to ask you, what are the risks? What are some of the big risks out there that companies have to look
And
for?
listen, supply chains are looking at many different types of risk. We have sourcing and procurement professionals who are looking at financial and legal and availability of materials for their suppliers. We have supply chains that are looking at risks associated with capacity, for example. And also in today's world, we've got half the world in election year this year. So geopolitical risk is top of mind for many global organizations also.
Now, we can't stop risks, bad things from happening out there, but are there ways that we can reduce the likelihood, number one, and the impact, number two, of supply chain risk?
Absolutely. So we can reduce the likelihood of risk by thinking about our supply chain as a target on the wall. The more complexity we have, the more our target gets bigger. Therefore, if we right size our supply chain, those risks fly straight past us and we reduce the likelihood. We also, though, can reduce the impact. And this is typical things in supply chain, like qualifying alternative suppliers, creating capacity, thinking about where we are locating our premises, for example. So we can reduce risk in many different ways.
But we could theoretically just wall up our supply chain, or at least try to. But there are other considerations like cost.
Absolutely.
So there's this idea of companies and supply chains having a so-called risk appetite. How much risk is acceptable? How do you balance that equation?
Absolutely. So it's really difficult, right? And you're right. We do not want to mitigate every risk down to the lowest possible level. What I would say is this: for disruption-based risks, we can count how much disruption would cost us. We can count how much proactive mitigation we can put in place up front. And we can also count if we did nothing and we just responded. Now, if we look at the profit and contribution of products and services, we can balance that equation to think about actually how much do we want to spend to mitigate risk.
the C-suite is looking over your shoulder the whole time, saying maybe you have a chief risk officer, maybe you don't, but you got a CFO for sure, saying, well, that's going to cost too much money. So you've got to somehow make the case. Do you think the C-suite, we talked at the beginning of this conversation about a growing awareness of risk. Is the C-suite behind the efforts? Are they backing up the efforts to really shore up a supply chain and make it more resilient?
So I think there's an interesting conversation to be had here. A year ago, the C-suite wanted us to be resilient everywhere. We have realized we cannot get it, and we cannot afford it. And we have indeed knee-jerk reaction, place mitigations where actually we didn't necessarily need them. And we've used less than half the redundancy that we have to respond to disruption. So where we are going now is a very methodical question and conversation with our C-suite partners. What risks are you comfortable to take, and how much do you want to invest? So it's a very different conversation from you must invest everywhere for everything.
You say, hey, I've got an idea. Let's just flood the channel with inventory. We'll be fine. And that's not acceptable.
No, not to any CFO, no.
Yeah, okay. So technology.
Yes.
Where does that come into the picture, especially so-called digital technology? How does that help?
So 91% of our clients either are or are investing in technology to help them sense and respond to risk. Technology is your friend here, and you will need technology to be able to do that. The key to being able to use it effectively is to think about where that information is going to go within your supply chain on those risks, and use that technology as a decision-making vehicle rather than an information collecting vehicle. And then you get the ROI on that technology. But I firmly believe that all supply chains are going to need to use technology to identify, assess, and determine how to mitigate risk.
And digital meaning, of course, automation of manual tasks.
Absolutely.
The amount of data coming in just can't be handled anymore by spreadsheets and human beings. So we need the technology. Great nuance in this conversation, Heather. Thank you so much for helping us to understand just how risk can be managed in a supply chain today. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much.
I've been speaking with Heather Wheatley of Gartner. Thank you very much for watching.